Welcome, everybody, to the Nobody Studios Culture live stream show. I'm your host, Sejal Thakkar, and I'm so thrilled to have you joining us today. So, depending on where you're at, it could be good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. We've got people always signing on from all over the globe. So, thanks for joining us today. We're going to have an excellent conversation. As I was preparing for today's talk with our trailblazer that I can't wait to introduce you to, it really reminded me that, the world of leadership and culture and business is really going through a huge transformation right now. So we're at this like critical point right now. And for me, there's nothing more important than sharing good information, and how we can redefine the way that we work, the way that we lead so that we can become the best version of ourselves, right? And so let me set the stage for today's show. It's really about we're going to be talking about two things, right? We're talking about human performance and workplace culture. And we all know that these are interconnected. And so we know that in order for us to have the kind of culture that we want at Nobody Studios, where we put people first, right? And we help create those environment where people can thrive, we really need to focus on how do we support the humans that are contributing to our culture. And every person in our ecosystem, both internally and externally, impacts the culture at Nobody Studios. And so how do we coach these individuals so they can be the best performers so that we can accomplish that goal of building 100 companies in the next 5 years? So today we have a true trailblazer, a good friend as well, John Christian Jervert, who's really a subject matter expert. And I was telling John before we jumped on that the best part of being a host for the show is I really get to pick the brain of people like John who have been doing this, who are passionate about it, and really understand that relationship between human performance and workplace culture. So welcome to the show, John.
Thank you, Sejal. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thank you so much for taking time to have this really important conversation. And so, let's just jump right in. I would love for you to, if you could share a little bit more about your background, because you have an impressive background, and really kind of share a little bit more about what got you interested and inspired to dive into this, this area of human performance coaching.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's been a wild journey, and I never thought I'd end up where I am today when I started, but it really did start with one question that my daughter asked me about a decade ago. She said, "Dad, you love what you do?" And at the time, I was actually stuck in a corporate environment that was pretty toxic. And I always had this passion for life and adventure, and I felt a little piece of me dying. And like many people, there's a little bit of fear when you take a leap of faith into the unknown. So I had a family of four, and I knew that something wasn't right. And that question really set me on a journey. And what I did as a result was I decided to start leading by example. And I think many times in a leadership position, that's the biggest thing that we can do for our companies is to step into that leadership role. So I left the banking industry, and I started doing things like skydiving and bungee jumping and endurance races and backpacking 3/4 of the coast of Costa Rica. And through that process, I started gaining the courage to relentlessly pursue my dreams. And so I found myself at this longest left-hand break in the world. And just with this mission that was placed in my heart. So I came back to the States and I started facilitating adventure challenge retreats and experiences and connecting these physical experiences with the mental resilience and lessons that nature teaches us. And so I experimented for about 5 years and then formed a company, and that got me into learning about conscious human performance, which is connecting that metaphysical and physical lessons from nature. And I think having that awareness has been one of the most transformational things in my own life. And now I'm working to bring that into organizations, corporations, and individuals, and getting them hyper connected to their purpose and their mission, which is something I think Nobody Studios, the values around nurturing impact-driven entrepreneurs and leaders really resonates with me.
God, there's so much. I love that backstory about what inspired you. I think one of the, as you were talking, what jumped out at me was when I think about this area that you're focusing in on, one of the significant trends that I've observed in the work that I've done with working with organizations and seeing cultures really like all over the globe, right? I've had clients all over, is this increasing focus that I'm seeing on this sort of holistic well-being, right? So I think organizations and are finally starting to recognize what I think is like the obvious, but right, the physical, that we have to take care of not only the physical, but also the mental and the emotional well-being of our people, right? That's what's going to lead to that higher performance. So can you share maybe just from your perspective, what are some key emerging trends that you're seeing in this field of human performance coaching that, are really something that organizations really need to pay attention to, especially if they want to thrive in this constant world of change, right?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with the holistic wellness and well-being in the workplace. I think gone are the days of grinding it out and suffering from burnout. I believe that many companies are waking up and seeing that that's not a productive way to run an organization, and I believe that there's a shift in the level of consciousness in leadership in that sense. There's a lot of people now going from working in corporations to now working remotely. So balancing out that work-life balance when you're outside and remote from the work. I think also there's a drive towards purpose-driven coaching. So a lot of people are getting into corporate cultures, and a lot of them have such a strong pull inside of their mission that many employees lose their own mission in that process. So I believe that the purpose-driven company can also nurture the individual's purpose and vision. And I believe that that's an emergent trend that we're seeing in human performance. And also the idea of experiential and immersive learning, not just sitting in a boardroom or a lecture area, really experiencing both the mind and the body connecting, because we can intellectualize learning all we want, but until we embody it and become a loving, compassionate, powerful leader, that's not going to shift the consciousness of the company itself and drive the impact. So I think those are the major things that I'm seeing in the industry and in the world as well.
Yeah, no, those are great trends. And that's why I love the work that you're doing, because I do think that it boils down to how do we create those spaces for human connection? And I think that some of this has to happen face to face, right? And so, John, like this, our studio was started virtually during the pandemic, right? And most of our people, we haven't even met each other yet. We've got people working remotely in a virtual world all over the globe, right? And so what advice do you have, or how do you see the importance, I guess that's a better way of putting it, the importance of high performance coaching to meet the needs of like a distributed workforce like ours at the studio?
I think there's so many different things in people's lives that we don't really know what's going on unless we really take the time to understand that. And having a remote workforce and having the pulse of what's going on in the organization uh, through some sort of connection point, where it's group coaching or breakout groups or one-on-one coaching, where you can get an idea of what's truly going on behind the scenes. I think that allows us to really help those individuals across the board. So it's one thing to give people the skills that they need in order to do their job, but how can we empower those individuals in their life and navigate challenging things like people having getting sick, or um, medical issues or family issues, all sorts of different things. And we're looking at the holistic part of a person's life, not just one aspect of it. And I think in the past we've been more focused on work performance and optimizing that, but really optimizing individuals as a human being is the future for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's easy to forget that for a lot of people, remote working is a new thing, right? Like this is something that they haven't been used to. Like I started, when I started my own company in 2017, that's when I started working remotely. So I was already doing it prior to the pandemic, but a lot of people weren't. And so we have to, like you said, look at everything. And I think when I think of high performance coaching in the remote work sort of distributed workforce, I think there's certain skills that jump out that I know we need to work with people, right? Like self-discipline,
Mm.
to how do you manage your time when you're working remotely. It's not that, 8 to 5 schedule, there's often times where I'm sending emails at 1 a.m., right? Because that's finally the time I have to get back to my emails, right? So everybody answers at a different way. And then, like you said, like, how do we maintain those work-life boundaries, right? So I think high performance coaching could be really helpful and important. And I think that in a way, all leaders have to become high performance coaches to be able to lead their teams, to help them, especially in a remote world where, it's not just about meeting those numbers. It's about how do we empower those individuals so that they can create their own situations regardless of the physical location, or, where they are, right? So so you've had several conversations now. You've been a huge supporter of the studio. We really appreciate, your support, and you've interacted with a lot of different people at the studio, some different members of our leadership team. You've seen what we've been doing throughout our equity crowdfunding campaign. We've been very visibly doing these live streams and so forth. And so based on your experience with the studio and the culture at Nobody Studios, what do you think makes us unique as a company from a cultural perspective?
I think there's a big difference between companies that say that they're, out to impact the world and create a culture of connection and relationship. And a lot of people have that good intention, but it doesn't always come across when you get into the organization, because there's different levels of individuals at different levels of awareness and or consciousness in their own lives. And what I found with Nobody Studios is that embodiment of the mission and the message. Every single human being that I've connected with so far has that huge heart. Everybody is included in the mission. It's not like segmented. It's like, how can we come together as a unit to create the impact that we want to have in the world? So that was really what stood out, is that there's really this collective momentum with everybody on the team to not only serve the mission of the organization, but also, again, what we were talking about before, the mission of the individuals that are coming and becoming involved in those companies and everything that's going on in the studio. So it's been awesome to get to know everybody.
Yay! That makes my heart sing. Thank you. I love that. I've been saying since I've joined the studio, right? I've been saying this over and over again, that every person that comes into our studio, regardless of their job title or whatever, is a leader, right? And we need to develop our leaders. And that's why I was really looking forward to our conversation today, because I always want to empower our leaders. I'm always sharing information in there about, just this past week, I posted this kind of diagram of here's what management really is, which is very different than being a leader. And it was just a perfect one image that really highlighted that difference. And I shared that with the team, and to me, that's one way that I'm empowering our leaders to kind of recognize that there's a difference between managing people and leading people. First of all, that's a difference, but also the qualities and the skills, the characteristics that you need to embody to be a leader is different, and especially moving into the future. So I would love to hear from your perspective, what are some of the qualities and skills do you think are the most critical for leaders as we move into the future, right? And again, back to that question to tie it in, how is the work that you're doing can really help support the development of our leaders at Nobody Studios?
Yeah, absolutely. I break it down into a few different components. So part of conscious human performance, there's actually 5 components that I look at inside of individuals' style of approaching challenges and leadership. So the first thing I look at in a leader is their level of awareness or consciousness. So this allows them to really see the playing field, and everybody sees a different perspective of the same exact situation. So how can we holistically look at a situation and not based on maybe our past experiences or stories or things like that? So the awareness pieces and where somebody's seeing the world from is really important to understand. And that's the first piece, is the level of consciousness. And the second piece is connection. So there's the interpersonal relationships, not only the relationships with the team members, but also the relationship with yourself. So if you don't love yourself, how do you love others? Or, if you're not leading yourself, how do you love others? So, or lead others. So I think that's a really important relationship is the connection that you have with yourself and others. And then also for me, a big thing was with nature, so getting out in nature, because I think that that teaches us so much. That's life experience, not losing touch with that. The third component that I look at is in leadership is contribution. So really understanding what contribution that you want to play in the world, what impact that you want to have, and also knowing that you can play a bigger game, take that leap of faith and pursue those passions. And how is that connected with your work in the world? And that goes back to fulfillment. The truth is that 80% of the world's population isn't fulfilled in what they're doing. So how you contribute and where you're putting your energy is super important. And if it's not there, then maybe it's time to realign. The fourth component is commitment. So a lot of times people say they want to do something, but their actions speak differently. So how committed are you to this vision? That also goes into commitment we talked about earlier with commitment and moving into your day and making sure that you're taking care of your physical health as well as your mental health. So taking some time out in the morning to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. So that's a component. And the last component that I incorporate for conscious human performance is actually life experience and or adventure. So, how are you incorporating, time for yourself, time for your team to get together outside of work environments to really connect, like we used to around in tribes when we used to sit around the campfire and
Yeah.
spend time together. So those are the major components that I look at from the standpoint of leadership.
Wow. I mean, this really goes in the face of everything that we've been taught, right? Like, go, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle. I mean, honestly, until COVID, I can tell you that I didn't stop to think about anything. I was just doing things because I had to just survive, right? And that really, I think, is important to highlight in this conversation with what John, everything you just talked about, which no wonder we connect so deeply because we resonate on all those. I love everything you said. I'm on the same page. Things like empathy, being adaptable. How many times I hear people saying they're asking me to do things that are outside the scope of what I was hired to do. And I'm like, yes, we have to be adaptable, especially at a studio like Nobody Studios where we're going fast. We're making quick decisions. We're relying on trust. So we have to be excellent communicators. And what I loved about what you said is this idea of we all view things from our own lens and perspective. And so I think some of the things for leaders in the future is you have to be excellent communicators. You have to keep working on how you communicate because what worked for you in the past isn't going to work in the future, right? We have to learn how to connect with each other on that deeper level. And there's no shortcuts. There's absolutely no shortcuts. There's no way around it. You have to make time to get to know each other. And you have to spend that time asking those questions and really creating those ways that people can lead authentically, right? But again, people don't know how to do this. So for people that are watching, John, they don't have the tools and strategies, aside from contacting you, obviously, for guidance on this topic, since you're an expert in this area. What are some advice that you have for people that are just getting started in this sort of holistic way of looking human performance coaching? What is some advice that you have for people that literally are like feeling overwhelmed? How do I even do this? We've got a team of 1,000 people. How do I get started? What is some advice you have for those folks?
Well, I think really the first thing is rising to the challenge. So knowing that you can take a leap of faith into the unknown and that things will work out. We always look for certainty, and a lot of times the biggest growth is in that uncertainty. And that allows us to gain the courage to relentlessly pursue our dreams and really live life on our terms. So we have to create a culture of possibility that nurtures individual visions. So my biggest advice for anybody that has something in their heart is to really take that leap of faith and overcome that fear and gain that courage to move forward and know that we will adapt. Humans were meant to adapt. to situations. We've been doing it for thousands and thousands of years. And, second is to have the team of people around you that encourage you, because a lot of times we set out with these big missions and visions, and if you don't have the right network, they're gonna say, hey, what are you crazy? Like, so having those people in your life that push you on and encourage you to do that. And that's what I love about conscious human performance, is it focuses on awakening human potential
Mm.
and allows people to really understand what makes them feel fully alive inside, and also helps them understand who they are at the core. And if we have a culture and organization of individuals that knows who they are and what they represent and what they've dedicated their life to, that's powerful. That's an unstoppable organization. And I believe that that's what Nobody Studios is doing, is getting people connected with basically their reason for existence. And if that's aligned in the organization, everybody's thriving, and you get a society where 100% of people are fulfilled in what they do, you know?
I love that. I mean, I love all of that. And I've seen that happen at Nobody Studios over and over again, where we might have a certain kind of idea of how this individual can contribute to our journey. But then once we get to know the person and we get to understand what their strengths and weaknesses are and where they need additional support, where we initially brought them in and where they ended up could be totally different. But it's really about finding that sweet spot for that person, not really about fitting somebody into a box, right? Which that's I think the key takeaway for me is there is no one size fits all solution to bringing out the best in your employees. We really have to get to know them. So I love everything you're doing, John. I really appreciate you taking this time. I look forward to co-creating with you as we go forward, both at the studio and outside the studio, right? Like I really respect your leadership. So, I always love asking guests, this question as the chief culture officer at Nobody Studios, what are some ways that you would like to bring your superpowers, which I, again, have mad respect for, to the studio to help us take our culture to the next level?
Absolutely. Yeah, my passion and love is to bring purpose-driven, experiential, and immersive coaching and learning experiences into the world, and bringing together people all over the world through Nobody Studios community, impact-driven entrepreneurs and leaders through these shared experiences to deepen the relationships and also create a global impact, is something I'm extremely passionate about. It's something I've been doing since I was a young kid, bringing people together. And I think that that's one of the most powerful things we can do is create those experiential experiences, lifelong friendships, and then coming together to create impact-driven organizations that are then going out and creating ripples in the world. So if I could play a small part of that, I'd be a happy man.
I would love that. Nothing more than that. I'm always like, I feel like I'm a broken record sometimes at the studio. I'm always like messaging Mark and I'm like, how about I do this once a month? How about I do this every 2 weeks to get people together, because I just believe in the power of that connection. And if people feel connected to each other, that's how we're going to build the trust to help us go build those companies that we want to build. Right? I truly believe that. Like, I don't think that goal, when I first heard it, I was like, oh my God, this is just outrageous. Like, but now as I say it over and over again, and I say it literally almost once a day, I'm like, that we're going to crush that goal. If we do this people portion part of it right, if we support our people, I know we can, because the kind of people that are being drawn, like what you just said and how you want to contribute to our journey, the kind of people that are coming onto this journey are really those that want to make a true difference, really, and really take that change that we're seeing happen in the world by the horns and really be a part of it, right? So I can't wait to see what we do together. I'm looking forward to the retreats that you and I have been talking about. Thank you, everybody, for joining in today. This was such an illuminating conversation. I know I learned a lot. Hopefully you got a lot of value out of this conversation. Don't forget to sign in this Thursday. Usually Mark and I do the Making of a Nobody show on Fridays, but this week we're doing it on Thursday morning. So make sure you update your calendars. And Mark and I are going to be talking about our last core values. So far we've touched base on all of our core values. And we have one more that we're going to talk about, and we call that progressive, our capital and time efficiency. So we're really going to break that down, because I know a lot of people have been reaching out to me saying, what does that really mean? how does that impact your day-to-day and how you make these important strategic decisions? And how does this impact everybody from bottom to top, right? And so we're going to get into really that core value. So make sure you join us Thursday morning this week. And John, thank you again for making time for this conversation. It was a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, Sejal.
Okay. Bye, everyone.